Duty, honor, country dictate what you ought to be, what you can be, what you will be.
The destiny of man is not measured by material computations. When great forces are on the move in the world, we learn we're spirits, not animals.
Now, we are the masters of our fate.
Howdy, gents, and welcome to another episode of the Wolf and Iron podcast. I'm Mike Yarbrough, founder and curator of wolfandiron.com, and your host for the show. If you're like me, I'm willing to bet that if you think of a 16 or 17-year-old of the current generation, the first thought is not of someone who is a hardworking, self-funded go-getter, and you probably don't think of blacksmith or entrepreneur either. But those are exactly the qualities that drew me to my guest today, Mr. Liam Hoffman. I started following Mr. Hoffman's blacksmith work a few years ago on Instagram, and I think he was 17 at the time. Even back then, he was producing some amazing blades and axes, and his social media game was really impressive. He's now 19, still doing what he loves, and I wanted to get his perspective on how he found his calling at such a young age, a primitive calling at that, and what other men can do to pursue their dreams and make them a livable reality. As you're listening to this, head over to wolfandiron.com/004 to see more on Liam and have a look at some of his hand-forged creations. You're sure to be impressed. Let's welcome him to the podcast. Mr. Liam Hoffman, thank you so much for talking with me today.
Thanks for having me on here.
Absolutely. You and I were just talking a few minutes ago that it's always creepy when I say this, that I've been following somebody for a while online, right? That used to be a bad thing to tell people, but now it's a good thing. So I've been following your work for a while, and you just got a tremendous amount of talent. And I guess it wasn't probably maybe a few months ago that I found out that you're a pretty young guy doing blacksmithing, which is a skill that generally takes years and years and years of work, which you've actually put in. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But I've just been really impressed by just the continued effort that you put into the style and just the finished product that you make. And I'm really eager to talk to you about the process, not only of making knives and axes and various things that you do, but also the promoting of it, because you seem to be pretty good at that as well. So before we jump into all of that, tell us a little bit about like where you live and your age, how you got started with blacksmithing, and kind of give us an overview.
Okay. Well, I live in the northwestern corner of North Carolina in the Blue Ridge Mountains. It's a big skiing destination for that corner of the country, Sugar Mountain, Grandfather Mountain, near Boone, North Carolina, where App State is.
Yeah.
So it's a very rural area, and I've always grown up in a rural area in the woods. So I've always been surrounded by just doing creative things. I mean, really, you're forced to do something with your hands and creativity when you live in a place like this, because there's really nothing else to do that you could do in a city. And I got started when I was 13 years old in blacksmithing, and I'm 19 now.
Wow.
I got started when I was 13, said just because I was born one day, and I didn't really know what I was doing. Like I just started beating on a piece of metal, and later I found out that I was blacksmithing, and it has just evolved into what it is today, which is a full-time business, and I've got 2 part-time employees with me, and we ship internationally, and it's just Everything's going really well.
So you started this when you were 13. That's when you started to kind of get the knack for it and to kind of pick it up, right?
Yeah. I started when I was 13. I think I was in like 8th grade, and I just kind of did it here and there. And
yeah,
I think I was out of it for like a summer or something. I didn't do any. Mm-hmm. And then 14, my dad built me a small forge so I could start doing more stuff in. And I mean, like, I didn't have any tools. No one in my family does this. I didn't know anyone who did this. And my parents couldn't find anyone who would willing to teach me. So I started with just I'm pretty sure I was using a claw hammer as my first hammer to forge on stuff.
Yeah.
And, so I was just bored, and then it turned into this.
But it's cool that you say that you're bored. I grew up in the country, so I get a lot of that too, from my own experience. I can look back on things that I see now developed into talents that really just came from, there was nothing else to do, right? So I was in my granddad's shed, tearing up things, that he probably cared about, and, making them into new things. Actually, upstairs, I've got a nice, I'm not sure what the proper term for it is, but it's a type of knife, like an Indian knife, like a kukri or something. It's kind of a curved blade, right? Yeah. And it was in my granddad's shed, and there was actually two of them kind of crisscrossed together on this old plaque, and they were pretty rusty. And I thought, that's like gold mine for a kid, right? So I pulled them down, and I got the nails out of them or the bolts out of them, and then sanded them down, and I still got it, actually. So there was a lot of that stuff going on. But the thing that's interesting to me is that blacksmithing, to me, that's hard work, right? That's not like, I'm going to go and carve a little bow out of a tree and shoot some arrows and that kind of stuff. It's pretty tough work. So, is there a reason that metal work, do you think, just drew you in and kept you going with it?
Prior to me getting into blacksmithing, I'd always been into other types of things, and I sort of lost interest in them after a while, and blacksmithing stuck for some reason. It's really physical work, especially until you get the right equipment to produce the volume that you need to. But, some things that I like about blacksmithing is, it's almost like pottery, except 5 times harder. You can't touch it. You have to hold it with tongs, different tongs for different shapes. You have to sculpt the steel with different types of hammers and anvils and other tools, and there's different temperature ranges, and so it's like working with clay when the steel is red hot. But you can imagine you're faced with a lot of different obstacles in your way, and also with blacksmithing, there is unlimited ways, different directions that you can take it. So there's knife making, there's axe making, and tool making, which are the 3 things that I specialize in. And there's some blacksmiths are ornamental blacksmiths. They make gates, and some blacksmiths specifically do only hammers, and in the knife making case, most of knife makers are not blacksmiths.
Right.
Most of the custom knives made today are not forged. They're stock removal. And so it's like 2 different worlds that kind of combine, and there's this area in between. What I always say is that blacksmiths aren't knife makers, and knife makers definitely aren't blacksmiths. So I don't know what I am, because if you look at all these knife makers, even the guys who forge knives, they have their forging techniques, and the way that they forge things is just it's wrong. It's not. Yeah. A blacksmith would look at that and laugh at them, and then a blacksmith, if he tried to make a nice knife, the knife maker would be laughing at him, because he can't make anything that's nice and clean. So they're just 2 totally different worlds that are also really similar. And then if you go into knife making, then you get into all other things: leatherworking, woodworking, carving, engraving.
Exactly.
Just heat treat, metallurgy. It's endless different possibilities you can go through. So I just never get bored with it.
Hey, I want to jump into kind of jumping back a little bit to when you guys started. So when you were 13, you kind of started to figure it out on your own. Was there at any point where you were apprenticed in this, or was it still something that you just kind of did YouTube videos or whatever to kind of figure it out on your own?
Yeah, my parents tried to find someone to teach me around here, and there's several guys around here, and none of them wanted to do it. And it's funny now because I'm like friends with them, and I'm doing stuff that's like way ahead of them now. So it's kind of funny, but no, I'm all self-taught. I mean, YouTube videos, and I'm not a big reader. I wasn't then. I do read more now, but so it was mainly just YouTube videos and trial and error. Yeah. And I think that trial and error is the best way to learn. It's the slowest, but the things that it teaches you is just someone that's taught could never know the things that you know. One of the best ways to teach someone is to show them how to not do it.
Right.
And because when a problem happens to me, I know how to fix it. The problem happens to someone else, they don't know how to fix it. And not everyone can learn by trial and error, because trial and error is just failure after failure after failure. And a lot of people can't handle the failures. It depends what you do with the failures that defines you from someone else, from being successful to someone who just goes another direction after they hit a wall. And so learning to overcome mistakes and figure out things is actually sort of enjoyable process for me, oddly enough. I mean, when today I'm trying to figure out how to make things faster without compromising quality. So it's kind of like a puzzle. I figure out how to cut 10 minutes here and cut 10 minutes there, and it feels really good when you figure out those sort of things and how to make things better, and just forging processes, because you can take a block of steel and make it into one thing, and you can take the same block of steel and make it into something totally different. It's all a series of steps on how to move the steel, and you have to figure those out.
Good. How old were you when you started selling your work?
I think I was around 16.
So was that weird? Like when people, because I know anytime somebody's starting a business for the first time, and especially if it's something that you've made, it's always hard to put a price point on it, right? And to know, like, how much should I sell this for? Am I ripping this person off? Am I selling myself short? You know, what was that like, I guess, at the age of 16? Because by then you'd been making stuff for a while.
I don't know if I really put that much thought into it when I was 16. I didn't know what I was doing at all, but my stuff was not expensive. It was very crude work. And I mean, I think my parents probably helped me there with, I've had a lot of support from them, and so they helped me with selling my stuff, pricing it. I mean, I've done all of my advertising myself, and I've bought all of my equipment myself, but they've helped me with just advice and things like that. And over time, I slowly got a better idea of how to price my stuff and stuff like that. It's just a learning process.
And I think that's actually a good lesson there, because a lot of guys, I mean, including myself, before we start a venture, we want to have all of our ducks in a row. We want to know that everything's lined up and everything's perfect, and, you know, almost like if we do everything right, we're guaranteed success, right? But I think sometimes you just got to go out there, and I mean, it's great to get help from whoever you can get help from. Don't turn down any help. But I think that, you know, if you start off with something crude and people want to buy it, you know, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Everybody's got to start somewhere.
Yeah, there's a market for that stuff, definitely. And yeah, you have a really good point about just jumping into it. Like, people message me on Instagram, like young guys in their 20s, and they're like, I really want to get into blacksmithing. How do I start? What do I need to get?
Right.
And I'm like, dude, just do it. Like, there's no right time. You just have to do it. You can start this evening. You don't need anything but a hammer, it doesn't matter what kind, and something that you can hit it on, and a fire. That's what I started with. You just have to get going, or you're never going to do it.
So one of the things that I really like about your work is that you just have a really good style, and because you're not focused on just knives or just axes or just tools, you actually see kind of a consistent and unique style across all of your work. And I'm wondering, like, where does that influence come from? Are they kind of taken from a certain time period? I mean, I'm not saying that you have one style of knife and one style of axe, but you obviously have a style that seems to be your own, but there's also influences that I can see from, across a range of other styles. I just didn't know if there was a particular time period or anything that you get your influences from.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know myself. I didn't until a couple months ago ever start drawing anything I was going to make. I usually just make it, and it just comes out the way. I see a lot of guys out there who like draw up all their stuff ahead of time and plan out materials, and that's a really good thing to do. I've started doing that now for some things, but still most of the things, all my designs and shapes and everything, I just forge it to shape. It's a lot easier for me to forge something to what's in my mind than it is for me to draw it. And I'm not really into history and historical weapons, so I don't get influence from that. I don't know. I just make whatever I think looks cool. With my knives, I never pick out the handle materials until after the blade is done, and then I decide what suits it best.
That's cool. That's really, I would imagine that's fairly unique. I think about sculptors and people who, generally they're pretty good artists, from the get-go, right? And they get into sculpting and stuff. But I guess it has to be the other way around too. There have to be sculptors out there who, they really, when they work with the clay, that's when their art comes out. That's pretty cool. That was actually an unexpected answer. I thought you were going to say like, oh yeah, 1800s axes, early Americana, something like that. But that's cool.
I just make it.
It's kind of ironic, I guess, in a sense that you've got this ancient craft that you're building a business around. Yet I can go to your website, I can look at your pictures, I can see, I can order products and that kind of stuff. And you're really big on Instagram in terms of, you got a pretty big following out there. So I'm just wondering, like, how much of your time is actually devoted to the marketing side of things and, kind of keeping your Instagram up and how many orders, I mean, I don't have to have an exact, but just percentage wise, how much stuff actually comes back through those social media channels versus like word of mouth?
Well, I have no local orders anymore. Everything's online, so everything is Instagram and Facebook, and I don't do the forums, but some people have been posting my stuff on forums, so it's getting out there. But as far as how much time I spend, it's probably too much. A lot of times it's too distracting when I'm trying to work, and I've gotten better at it, but just get the phone away. I don't know. I put several hours a day in, probably, between Instagram and Facebook. I only upload photos to my Instagram now that I've taken with my nice DSLR, and I've edited, and that takes time. I have to keep the camera in the shop and take photos whenever they come up. Whenever I think it will look cool, I just stop my work, take a photo, and that might seem crazy, but Instagram is, where most of my orders come from. So it's really important for me to give people a feed that's not just like everyone else. I mean, I try to do the best with my photos and stuff like that. And most of my orders come from Instagram right now, and I think Facebook is starting to get bigger too.
It is interesting how, if you go on Instagram, you see a lot of people making stuff and selling things, right, that they're making by hand. And I think obviously it's not quite the same, but there's got to be something of that kind of old draw when you went past a blacksmith's shop and you saw him doing his work and you thought, man, that's kind of cool to watch. My wife and I were actually in Asheville a few months back, And we were just kind of touring around and kind of went off the beaten path a little bit. And we ended up going past this glass blowing place, right? And these guys they've got these huge doors open. It's a pretty big place on the inside. They've got a lot of really neat stuff for sale that's way out of our price range. But the guys are in there blowing the glass, and they're just, walking through it. It's two guys working in tandem, with the whole process. And just watching that, there's a draw to that. And I think Instagram provides some of that for whatever reason that we're lacking. Obviously, if you go to Walmart or if you go to some, big brand knife shop online, you're not going to see that kind of intimate process with the maker creating things. And I think part of that is the story that we all really want to be connected to. I think it's one of the reasons that a lot of the artisan crafts are coming back and becoming successful, is because of the kind of things that you're doing.
Yeah, it's just a primal desire. I mean, everyone today is just like sedated by office work and just a boring work life, and they don't know anything else. And then they see something like a guy swinging a hammer or playing with fire or just doing something that's masculine. It definitely hits them home. And so you're playing on their emotions and they don't even know it. And it's definitely a primal thing for males. I mean, obviously almost all my following is males. There's really no women following me. And it's just because it doesn't interest them as much. And like you said, you went into that glass blowing shop and you just feel a connection to it, and just fire and sweat and just work and loud noises. It's just appealing. That's all the guys who live in the city. They want to be that guy.
Exactly. No, that's absolutely right. It's funny. By day, I work as a software developer, and there's a lot of neat things about my job. It's a very intellectual job, so it's stimulating in that way. But I create a lot of virtual things. So at the end of the day, there's not much to take home. But we work uptown, and there's construction going on right across the way, and we can look out the window, and all the guys, I mean, without fail, will come to the window of the little coffee room, right? And we'll look out at the construction workers that are, hauling steel and putting up boards and doing all this kind of stuff. And we kind of think, I wish I could drive that crane, or I wish I could do whatever these guys are doing. I wish I could hammer those nails or rivet those things. And, it's a draw. It doesn't matter where you come from. I think that it's one of those things that because the work is hard, there's something about it that's, maybe it's the fact that you'll be tested. I don't know what it is, but there is something about it that pulls you in and pulls you towards it. So I think you're definitely right when you say that. Tell us kind of like what a typical day looks like for you. I saw on your website that your hours are from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. And if you're a small business owner of any sort, you understand the 12-hour day is kind of the norm. But what does that day look like? If there is a typical day, there might not be.
Well, I work on a lot of different things at once. So I'll have knives in the heat treating oven, and I'll be forging axes, and something will be the glue will be drying on something. And so I've got a lot of different things going on at once. So sometimes I'll switch back and forth. When one thing needs to sit, I'll go to another. But I usually don't get in the shop until 9:30 or 10 o'clock most days, because I have to answer emails and do my social media in the morning, and then I'm doing social media throughout the day, and then before I go to bed I'm doing social media. But the actual shop time is not like a 9 to 5 job whatsoever. Like, for me to work 3 hours straight is rare. My customers probably don't want to hear that, but like anyone who's an entrepreneur and a small business owner will know that it's it's a 7-day a week
Yeah.
job, 24/7. You're always in it. And there's more to it than just the actual physical work or the creative work. There's a lot more stuff. There's mailing or shipping and just miscellaneous little doodads that you have to do. And I recently just hired someone to do that, most of that stuff for me. And that was just a week ago that this has just happened. And like the last 3 days, I've been super productive because I haven't had to do half the stuff that I used to have to do that is almost a waste of my skill. You just have to think in terms of like, what is a waste of my skill? What could I let someone else do? And it's just hard to be productive in the shop. I think anyone in this field would tell you that.
Well, I think if you're like me and like other entrepreneurs, it's hard to stay focused on one particular thing for a long period of time. I mean, and not to say that we all have ADD or ADHD or whatever. It's not that. It's that our minds are active and we crave, sort of a creativity. And so I know if I'm out in the shop and I'm working on something, I can. There's some times where I can spend an hour and a half or 2 hours at it and not bat an eye. But there are other times where it's kind of like you said, hey, I want to take a picture of this, or I'm having another thought about an email I need to answer, or whatever the case is. And it's actually, in some ways, it's actually more productive, I feel, to be a little bit spontaneous there, throughout the day and kind of manage my time, not so structured. I don't want to think that, okay, if I'm doing a job, I've got to sit down for 4 hours and do it, or I've got to stand at the shop bench and do it, for 4 hours, no matter what, right? It's part of one of the perks of being an entrepreneur and being a business owner is actually being able to kind of follow your own natural inclinations towards how you do work. So I think that's good that you're able to do that and share that. That's cool.
Yeah, I was listening to a guy talking about entrepreneurs, and he called ADD ADA advantage over other people.
Nice.
Because we're just like all over the place, always thinking of stuff, and I really do have like really bad ADD and horrible memory. Like I'll like decide I want to do something, and then 10 seconds later I'm doing something else. Like I knew I needed to do something, but I forgot what it was now.
Yeah.
And
it used to happen to people only when they got old, but now it happens to everybody. I think it's just part of the way. I don't know if it's technology taking over or what the deal is. No, I definitely get that too, and that is sort of the ADD mind or the creative mind. We're always grasping onto the next thing that catches our attention.
Attention deficit advantage.
I like it. Yeah. So, all right, parents out there's hope for your children.
You need to just support that.
Well, let me ask a couple more questions here, and then we'll wrap up. Is there any kind of advice or wisdom that you would want to share with the world of men on just getting out there and following their passions, similar to what you've done?
Well, like we said earlier, they just need to do it. I mean, first you need to find what you need to do. And then you need to visualize in your head your end goal. Your end goal could be 1 week, a month, a year, lifetime. But set some sort of end goal and visualize it, and then just start. I mean, you just got to start. You just got to start doing it. And then anything that gets you closer to that goal is good. Go after that. And, I mean, surround yourself with positive thinking people. Someone said, what did he say? You're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, which is, I think, is true for sure. I really despise negative people. I think negatively of negative people
suck.
And it's not good for you. I mean, being successful is all about your mindset. If you don't think that you can do it, then you're never going to do it. You have to think that you can do it, and you have to visualize in your head what it is you're going to. And only when you do that, you can start making steps towards what you're going to do. I mean, the only thing that's holding like 9 out of 10 people back is that they just don't think they can do it. Like someone sees an actor on TV and they're like, oh, well, I can't do that. I'm not that kind of person. Like, well, you have to make yourself that kind of person. Some people are born into it, whatever, but to be that kind of person, you have to make yourself that kind of person. And everyone works in their grocery store jobs for 20 years because they're a prisoner of their own mind. They just don't think anything else is possible. Yeah. For the most cases, I think.
No, that's good. That's good.
And then you have to put massive amounts of work into it, more than anyone else would. You have to just think to yourself, make a note to yourself to work more than anyone else is to achieve your goals, because it's not easy. I mean, I've put, who knows, we'll add up 8 to 12 hours a day, 7 days a week for the last 3.5 years. That's how many hours I've put into it. I've put an insane amount of time into it.
Man. Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And something that you said earlier gave me a thought there. Is that when you're 13 or when you're a kid, you just go after the things that just sort of appeal to you. You don't really question why, right? You don't say, I want to go bang on a piece of metal, but nobody does that anymore, so that's stupid, right? You don't say that. You just think, I'm going to do it. And you do it, and you kind of follow your passions. But I think as we get older, a lot of guys, they start qualifying the things that they're naturally drawn to. And they say, well, that's sort of stupid. I don't need to be an opera singer because that's not, I'm 40 years old or whatever the case might be. Or I don't need to be a blacksmith, or I don't need to be a shoemaker, or I don't need to be own a horse farm. Whatever the case is, I think sometimes we've got to listen to those things, right? I mean, it could be that we're just having a stupid thought, but I think it's okay to rely on that to a degree, and to say, you know what, it doesn't really matter if anybody in my family does this, or if there's any reason why I would have a passion for this. I just am drawn to it. Maybe it's something I would be into. And so I think guys need to just develop the freedom to say to themselves, you know what, this might not be something that I can really logically think of why I would be interested in it, but it might be my calling, and go out there and, like you said, just do it, give it a shot, and get started with it.
Yeah. People just need to be more decisive.
That's good.
People are so indecisive, like they can't just, like we're just talking about, they just can't do it. And I've always known what I wanted when I was a kid. Like, I guess that's called being stubborn and not wanting anything else. But I would always get in trouble at school. Like in elementary school, I all the teachers completely hated me. Like, they would recruit my friends to spy on me in elementary school, because I was making things out of paper clips and just not doing what anyone else wanted to do. And everyone thought that I was a problem child. And throughout all of elementary school, and then it kind of followed me into middle school and then high school, that kind of went away. But it's just interesting, the viewpoints of people in society of someone being a problem when that's totally wrong. They should be kind of nurturing that.
Yep, I agree. And it's hard to find, when you're in a classroom or whatever, and everybody's supposed to be following a certain rule and a certain pattern. It's hard to really devote time to the individual to say, you know what, you're doing something unique. Let's foster that and see that grow. I got one last question for you. What does it mean to you as a man to be able to do what you do with the blacksmithing and be successful at it?
I just think just having freedom and making your own choices is manly, and just not being a slave to someone else, and leading other people with my helpers, and just going out and trying new things, being courageous, taking risks, and hoping they'll provide rewards. And
well, Liam, I really appreciate your time, and I'll tell you what, you're setting a great example out there. Like you said, there are a lot of young guys that are looking up to you, that see what you're doing, and it's kind of a fresh light for them to say, hey, here it is 2016, and people can actually make money, banging on metal. This is awesome. Because there's some people that's what they want to do. That's what they're cut out for, and they ought to have that example that they can do that and be passionate about something that's kind of off the beaten path, and it doesn't involve sitting in a cubicle for the rest of your life, and be successful at it. And not only that, but you also have a really great style, and I wish you all the best of luck, and I look forward to seeing more from you over the years.
All right. Thanks for having me on here, Mike.
Men, I know some of you are listening to this and are already talking yourself out of your dream, whatever it is. Fellas, there's never a perfect time to fail, and that's really our main concern with any pursuit. We don't know if we have what it takes. Well, there's only one way to find out. Just go get after it. Until next time, keep your powder dry, and may a fair wind be always in your sails.